Can you tell? Good evening and welcome to GLN's weekly network TV show here on CAN TV. I'm John Meeks, and tonight I will be interviewing Andy Thayer regarding the situation in Russia and the draconian anti-gay laws which have been passed there, and what is happening with the possibility of a boycott of the Olympics, the boycotting of Russian-made products, etc. So, Andy, what is your take on as far as the possibility of a boycott against the Olympics? How do you?
In terms of boycott of the Olympics, you got to understand that this is something that has been tried before and with not very good results. People who are old enough may remember the boycotts of the games that happened in the 1980s, first in the United States boycotting the Olympics in Moscow, and then the Soviet Union repeating the favor with a boycott of the LA Olympics. And certainly the ones who paid the price were the athletes themselves, and it didn't move forward the agenda. I think in terms of the sort of actions that have really successfully pushed forward an agenda, a much more fruitful way to do that would be to look at what happened in the 1968 Olympics when Olympians did protest during the game. Juan Carlos and the other gentleman, his name's Smith was the other gentleman who did a very impressive protest when they won the games. And the fact that America, the United States, is a racist place was demonstrated to people right around the world in a way that is truly memorable. In fact, it's probably the thing that's most remembered about the 1968 games was the protest of African American Olympians against the racism of their own country. And so I think in terms of looking to a model of what can be done vis-a-vis the Olympics themselves, that's really what we should be looking to. And actually, LGBTs in Russia are planning protests around the Sochi Olympics along, maybe not specifically those lines, but certainly something with regards to the Olympics.
And what about the safety, though, of gay athletes who might be in Russia subjected to this law? I mean, they could possibly be arrested if they speak out or carry a flag, rainbow flag.
Well, I mean, I think it's got to be noted that LGBTs in Russia have been suffering from these sort of draconian attitudes of their authorities for actually many years now, without any protests, unfortunately, from many people in the West. That local versions of the same law that recently passed the National Duma have been rolled out over the past few years. And LGBTs in Russia, ever since they began organizing pride marches in 2006, have been subject to beatings and arrests. And frankly, the West has been silent during that, worse than silent. When Hillary Clinton went to Moscow a few years back to help the then Mayor Lutskov unveil a monument to the American gay icon, Walt Whitman, she cut the ribbon with this very, very homophobic mayor, the one who was at that time seen as the number one homophobe in all of Russia, and she didn't say anything.
No, I remember that.
About the about his homophobia. She should. That's an invitation she should have turned down if she was truly favoring LGBT rights. And one of the truly valuable things about the WikiLeaks revelations is that they showed that with regards to Russia, but as well as countries around the world, the United States really has not at all been concerned about human rights. That they have really attacked those who've tried to stand up for the Russian government has attacked people, and the U.S. has sat on its hands.
Right. And the Russian sports minister has come out, made a statement saying that the world should really calm down about state-sanctioned repression of gay people. I don't know if that's to sort of back off a little bit and make us, maybe gay athletes will be safe and not subject to the law when they go there. But I mean, it could just be more propaganda. Who knows?
Yeah, I think it truly is more propaganda. I think the one thing that people in the United States need to do much better than they have been doing heretofore is listening to LGBT Russian organizers themselves. I know that there was a boycott statement that was circulated, which they got some Russian signatories to after the fact, after it was launched. The fact of the matter is that this boycott was not launched by LGBT Russians themselves. None of those who have been involved in organizing the protests for equal rights within Russia were signatories to this, and they were not consulted about whether or not this is a tactic they endorsed and wanted to lead. You contrast that with how the boycott apartheid movement was successfully launched by black South Africans themselves from South Africa after extensive consultations, because they knew that they're the ones who were going to ultimately have to pay probably the heaviest price for that kind of tactic. And the same might be said of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement vis-a-vis Israel today. Those were indigenous movements started by the most affected themselves, led by the most affected themselves, and that's why they have been so successful. This current boycott, unfortunately, is very reminiscent and also led by many of the same people who did an ill-fated boycott Jamaica campaign a few years ago. For those in our viewing audience who don't know, Jamaica is a place that is rife with anti-LGBT violence. The organization, which is the primary organizer of LGBTs and for LGBT rights in that country, J-Flag, has lost a couple of its executive directors due to murder, and one has been exiled to Canada due to death threats. Unfortunately, North American activists, seeing the horrific violence, said, "Oh, we're going to launch a boycott." But they didn't even check in with the LGBTs within the country, have been organizing and taking the beatings, taking the arrests. And so the boycott flopped. Because, I mean, I think you have to, for something like this to be successful, it's got to be indigenous. It's about respecting the people who have paid the biggest price for the oppression in terms of the beatings and the arrests, and that's the problem, unfortunately, with the current boycott campaign.
Okay, and as far as the aspect of the there's a possibility I have heard that the IOC could possibly actually ban gay Olympians because of their support of the, they would want to ban. Prevent them from entering if they were gay, if they felt that it was a threat to the Olympic
movement or whatever. Yeah, right. Well, there is a provision in the Olympic regulations preventing people from demonstrating, for example, during the opening ceremonies, and you're subject to banning as a result. And it should be noted that the Olympics organizing committee, in terms of the modern Olympics, has never really been on the side of freedom. They've coddled up to dictators over and over again. The Mexico Olympics was a notorious example that there was a massacre of Mexican students in Mexico City. That, of course, the Olympic Committee did nothing about. The Olympic Committee itself was, for a few decades, led by a neo-fascist from Franco's Spain, and of course the story of the Nazi Olympics in Germany in the 30s is well known, with Jesse Owens and so forth. But I would think that we've got a few announcements, John, if we can perhaps switch over to them. Our website is www.gayliberation.net. Please check that out to find out more about the Gay Liberation Network. And we also have got some things coming up here that are very, very important. The March on Springfield for LGBT equality happening on Tuesday, October 22nd. This is a big deal because while the Supreme Court struck down Section 3 of the Defense of Marriage Act, people here in Illinois, same-sex couples still cannot access the 1,300 plus rights that come with marriage because Illinois itself hasn't gotten on board with that. And the place to go for more information about that is this www.marchonspringfield.org website. There will soon be transportation information, all sorts of things up there.
And there's merchandise and posters, really, that people can obtain as well.
Absolutely, John. In fact, the Gay Liberation Network is going to be having a booth at this weekend's North Halstead Market Days, and you can get, please drop by our booth. We're going to be someplace between Roscoe and Addison on Halstead. Just look for us there, drop in and say hi and take some literature for yourself. Another thing coming up is the March for an Elected Civilian Police Accountability Council to deal with the problem of police officers in this town who do not do the right thing vis-a-vis civilians in terms of brutality. So please check that out, coming up on Wednesday, August 28th. But back to the situation of...
Yes, well, back to the IOC, but that really, basically what they could probably do is just say, the gay Olympians can partake in the Olympics, but they'll have to sort of stay in the closet.
Be mute.
And
Exactly.
Be mute. Right, and you couldn't carry a rainbow flag if you wanted to subject you to being banned. It really is not a good situation, actually. That they wouldn't be more supportive of allowing freedom of expression regarding this matter.
Well, the Olympics have, as noted before, have really never been on the side of freedom. They've coddled up to dictators. But I would certainly encourage gay Olympians and supporters of LGBT freedom to do as the Olympians in '68 in Mexico City did. That would be a very powerful statement, not just against the Russian governmental hosts, but also against the IOC itself, and would be well deserved.
I would have to agree with you. I think it's very important, actually, that they do take place, and that this will draw a lot of attention to the issues in Russia, and hopefully people will be allowed to express themselves. And
the thing is that gay Russians, LGBT Russians, are expressing themselves, and this is, in that respect, this is nothing new. They have, since 2006,
severe penalties for
they've been paying severe penalties, and but since 2006, they've been holding public marches that have been banned by the authorities. Almost every single one of them been repressed by the authorities. People have been attacked by the neo-fascists. In fact, in 2009. I should say in 2011, when I was last there, we, in conjunction with LGBT Russians, had a pride event on Red Square that was not only attacked by neo-fascists, but then we were arrested, myself, Dan Choi, and a number of LGBT Russians. And just the day before that, several hundred neo-fascists had marched in the same location, totally unmolested by the police. And the thing that's horrible about it is that here you had nonviolent LGBTs committed to nonviolence, at least for this particular action, and you have neo-fascists who are, by definition, committed to violence against any number of different people, marching in a country that lost some 20 million people in World War II to the war against the fascists. And this is in a country that today has got something like 147 million people in it. By comparison, in all of the United States war, from the Revolutionary War to the present, this country has lost some 1.3 million soldiers. In World War II, Russia lost 20 million alone in a country that's half the population of the United States. Anyone who knows anything about Russia knows that it was horribly, horribly scarred by that, as well as Stalin's repressions and so forth. And for the present-day leaders to allow Sieg-heiling fascists to march in their equivalent of the Washington Mall, and yet to attack LGBTs, there's some real irony there. Yes.
Increasingly, more and more of these incidents are taking place, and there was recently a report I saw on a young gay man who was kidnapped by skinheads and humiliated and tortured, and there was a report out that this young man died actually from his injuries from this. I don't know if that was ever substantiated, but I did read that recently, and I guess this is becoming a common occurrence there. And I said I don't think there's enough that we can do to really sort of bring attention to this and try to get world attention, and try to get somehow put pressure on Russia to really reevaluate what they're doing here, because it is reminiscent, like many people have said, including the actor Stephen Fry, that this is similar to something like happening in Nazi Germany in the 30s by rounding up the Jews and minorities. Gays and lesbians were also, rounded up as well, and it is reminiscent of that, and it is scary about the loss of freedom taking place, and also this targeting of minorities.
Well, in national
in such
minorities,
a large and powerful country.
In national minorities, people, non-Russian nationalities, people who are from Asia and so forth, are particularly targeted for violence even more than LGBTs. One thing that people here in the United States can do that has been very specifically been endorsed and encouraged by LGBT Russian activists themselves, in contrast to the vodka boycott stuff, is they're asking all city governments around the world that have got sister city relationships with Moscow and other cities to cut those ties. And Chicago has got a sister city relationship with the city of Moscow, and to its eternal shame, right now, the city of Chicago is refusing to cut that sister city tie. And this is something that LGBT Russians themselves have specifically asked for, and rather than give us cant about, pouring your Stoli vodka or what have you, if the city administration of the city of Chicago wants to do something to truly support Moscow and other LGBTs in Russia, then they need to cut that city that city sister tie. So that's something specifically that we can do here in Chicago. We can contact the mayor's office, contact your alderman, and demand that they cut that sister.
And this action is in fact taking place in Europe.
Yes.
And around the world. How effective it's going to be, I guess you can't say, it's too early to tell, but that is, I think it's probably more effective than probably trying to boycott vodka.
Yeah, but, and it's unclear who is being hurt by the vodka. There's been some things that saying, well, it's Latvians, rather than, and the Latvian LGBT group has come out specifically against the Stoli boycott, and there are some Russian ties there, but the Latvians are saying, please don't do this. The main thing I've been hearing from Russian activists themselves inside the country that have been organizing the protests is that this is not going to be effective, that's really not the way to go. They're actually going after Stoli, etc., to say, we want you to endorse Sochi Pride and stick it to the Russian government that way. So that's perhaps a way that we should go on that. But we do... I did want to point out that we did win an important victory here in Chicago recently with undocumented people. We were going to have Father Jose Lendaverde on our program tonight. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it. He's been one of the leaders of the protests by the undocumented. This is some scenes from that protest in front of Northwestern University. They forced the university to agree to treat undocumented people on a par with other people needing organ donations. Most people don't realize that while undocumented are organ donors at basically the same rate as everyone else, they are a tiny, tiny percentage of the actual recipients. And so while they give,
Very
they
tiny.
don't receive.
Exactly.
And this protest, fortunately, forced two hospitals, Christ Memorial, I believe it's called, as well as Northwestern Memorial, to concede that. So our hats off to those activists there.
Important one.
Yeah, but we have just a little bit left in time here. Sochi Pride is going to be happening in February of this year during the Sochi Olympics, and at this point, LGBT Russians are encouraging people from the West to travel to Sochi or Moscow. They haven't figured out exactly where the protests are going to be, given travel restrictions and so forth, but this is the kind of aid that they are asking for. And they've appealed to Western embassies in the past to support them, and those appeals have fallen on deaf ears, unfortunately. And the sort of support that Western embassies, such as the Swedish embassy, have lent to activists in Serbia when the Serbian government banned their pride. The Swedish embassy said, well, we will allow the pride to take place on the embassy grounds. That's something that the Western embassies could do vis-a-vis Moscow and Sochi Pride, and supporting LGBT Russians in a way that they haven't heretofore.
Yeah, and also I think it's all very important to note too that the president actually has come out and been very strong in his support of the violations of rights of LGBT rights in Russia.
Yeah,
So,
I would say that that's unfortunately it's quite cynical. I think it's more that the United States is pissed off about the whole Edward Snowden situation.
Probably, perhaps,
And
but I mean,
and it is really, if the president was really in favor of LGBT rights, he'd be cutting off military aid to the Saudi Arabian dictatorship right now, which executes gay people. Wouldn't be supporting the Honduran coup regime, which has led to a wave of violence.
Right.
And so, I think when President Obama says he supports LGBT Russians, I think it's frankly dripping with cynicism that he says that, because his administration sure as hell hasn't supported in a meaningful way LGBT Russians heretofore, and certainly isn't supporting them in places like Honduras and Saudi Arabia.
no, he's not. But I wanted to bring that up because he was on jail. I know the other night and made that very big statement. It was all over the news, and I thought it was impressive. But perhaps you do have a point, because there are other areas and where we're supporting governments who repress their LGBT population.
Yeah. Well, we're unfortunately right at the end of our time here, John. So we're going to just finish up with a few quick announcements here. On your screen, you can see the information about the March on Springfield, October 22nd. That's a Tuesday. Take the time off now from work and school.
Yes, please come out and support. This is a very, very important march. It will happen just shortly before the veto session.
And there is the website where you can get more information about that. And also, we have got the March for an Elected Civilian Police Accountability Council on Wednesday, August 28th. And we've got our next meeting coming up. Always the first Wednesday of each month. September 4th is the next one at the Burger Park Cultural Center. And our next show is going to be in early September as well. Always the second Friday of the month on September 13th. And finally, just a thanks to the people who helped us out tonight.
Wow.